That's Diane Nash! She's the one to get!
Diane Judith Nash, a 20-year-old college student from Fisk College in Nashville, Tennessee, quickly slipped away, terrified of the white men shouting at her. She found a spot where she blended in with the crowd. She found herself gasping for air, though she had not run. It was as if the fear had sucked all the oxygen out of her system. She had to decide whether she had the strength to continue as a leader of the Nashville sit-ins. She wondered if she could conquer her fear. If she could not, she would have to resign from all aspects of the sit-ins. The most important thing she had learned from reading Mahatma Gandhi in her nonviolent workshops was that leaders did not expect others to do things they were not willing to do themselves. And Nash had found herself as a leader of the sit-ins, though she never sought the privilege.
When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we'll see, no, I won't be afraid.
Diane was a very forceful person, and yet she had a kind of quiet demeanor about her.
Diane Nash became a leader of many civil rights movements, including the Nashville sit-ins and the Freedom Rides. Her leadership was vital to the civil rights cause, which eventually led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the March on Selma, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, greater equality for all blacks, and greater equality for all women. Angered by the racism she had witnessed in Nashville, Nash wanted to find a way to take on the system. She was directed to nonviolent workshops run by Reverend James Lawson, who was there at the behest of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The groups would demonstrate verbal and physical attacks that they may face when protesting. He helped them learn how to put themselves between the opposition and somebody who was beaten. At first, when Nash attended the classes, she wasn't so sure she agreed with his teachings. She was skeptical about the possibility of success. Nash thought, "We are going up against white men who have power, and we're just students." However, she looked into herself and found unknown courage. "I found beautiful things in people who would care enough about other people to put their bodies between another person and danger." She had changed her mind and believed that nonviolence could work. Now that the groups had learned what they could in the workshops, they decided it was time to test out the store's policies, establishing that they would not serve an interracial or all-black group. When the first group went to Harvey's department store to test the policy, Nash was the designated spokesperson. The manager explained the policy of not serving blacks or whites with blacks. Nash politely thanked the manager and the group left. This model would be followed for some time. By this time, Nash was approached to become chairperson, and she desperately tried to decline, but eventually accepted.
Still waters run deep, and Diane had a way of being able to speak in a soft kind of tone, get your attention, and raise issues logically that would help you to rationally think through what it was that you were about to do and what you hope to accomplish.
On February 13th, 1960, they put the sit-ins in action. 124 well-dressed young supporters of the movement started a march from a church in downtown Nashville and walked to their sit-in locations.
The first sit-in we had was really funny because the waitresses were nervous, and they must have dropped $2,000 worth of dishes that day.
The first sit-ins resulted in the lunch counters being closed for the rest of the day. The sit-ins received a great deal of press. Diane Nash was in charge of speaking with the press, which kept her extremely busy, as the number of requests were far more than she had time. Nash helped lead the next 3 sit-ins. In their last sit-in, a mob of white men came into the department store and stood behind them, then attacked. Police did nothing to stop the attackers, but immediately stepped in when the attackers left to arrest Nash and the protesters, who still refused to leave the counters. When the judge found the group guilty, he gave them the option to pay $50 each or to spend the next 30 days in the county workshop. Nash spoke for the group and politely refused by saying, "We feel that by paying these fines, we would be contributing to and supporting the injustices and immoral practices that have been performed in the arrest and conviction of the defendants. On April 19, 1960, she and 3,000 others went to protest at City Hall about the illegal racist actions that had been taking place. During the protest, Mayor Ben West came out and Diane Nash confronted him.
I asked the mayor, first of all, Mayor West, do you feel that it's wrong to discriminate against a person solely on the basis of his race or color?
I could not agree that it was morally right for someone to sell them merchandise and refuse them service.
The mayor then worked on desegregating Nashville stores. The sit-ins had been an overwhelming success. Focus shifted in early 1961 from the department stores to integration of buses in a movement that was called the Freedom Rides. 13 blacks and whites sat integrated on buses from D.C. to New Orleans, but when they got to Alabama, they were attacked, and the movement almost fell apart due to the violence. In her words, I was able to see that if the Freedom Rides stopped after so much violence had been inflicted on the riders, the message would have been sent that inflicting violence would stop nonviolent campaigns. Southern white racists would have been determined to inflict massive violence in order to stop any nonviolent campaigns we started. Nash, now 23, stepped in and helped keep the Freedom Rides going.
Diane organized people from Nashville to come to Jackson, Mississippi by bus when people were arrested on the Freedom Rides, and they were not going to let us get into Jackson, Mississippi initially. And so she was one of those in the forefront.
She was the voice of the movement to the President of the United States, telling an aide to President Kennedy named John Siegenthaler, "We will not stop. There is only one outcome." Siegenthaler begged her to stop the rides. She refused, telling him that they were ready to die for this cause. She would not back down to the governor of Alabama, or even the President of the United States. These freedom rides would ultimately become very successful as the U.S. government gave in and forced the South to desegregate the buses.
She was one of the strong proponents of nonviolence, of direct action, of leading the sit-ins in Nashville, and participating in the freedom rides, especially from the Nashville leg.
The national sit-ins and the freedom rides led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. During the movement, Nash had to learn quickly how to talk to the press, how to speak to powerful individuals, how to represent the movement well, and how to organize and sustain a massive multi-state protest. Non-violent protests that followed, such as the March on Selma, followed Nash's ideas on how to sustain a movement. Nash is a symbol for many African Americans of defiance against aggression and violence. Her leadership showed whites as well as blacks that a woman could organize, lead, and speak for powerful movements. Today, she is sought after, constantly interviewed in many documentaries and books. Her opinion is sought after on current as well as past civil rights matters. Many Americans at the time said that desegregation would gradually happen. Some Americans also believed that she was endangering the lives of many people. Diane Nash disagreed because she knew this was a change that needed to be pushed. The young woman sitting on the curb in 1960s Nashville had no idea that she would change America. She knew she had to make a decision to either leave the Nashville sit-ins or stay with it. She had to make this decision quickly. She thought about how important the sit-ins had become to her. She realized this was the most important thing she had ever done and more valuable than anything she may ever do again. She knew she had to go forward. She would be very careful in every decision she made, but she would not turn back. If something terrible was going to happen, let it happen when she was doing something she believed in. She pulled herself up and went back to the protest.
To my Lord and be free.